Good morning and welcome to the VIP seat. Today is October 24th, and today's top stories in private aviation include how Wheels Up has now acquired the Grandview Aviation fleet, and the FAA's special regulations on powered lift and eVTOLs has now come out. Your hosts today include yours truly, Jessie, Naor, and Tom Lelyo. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hello, hello.
So sit back, buckle up, and let's take off. All right, so because I know everyone is going to want to hear this story, I'll roll into it first. For those who don't know or who are new to the podcast, I was one of the original founders and president of Grandview Aviation, and there was some huge industry news this week. Wheels Up has acquired the Grandview Aviation fleet. 17 aircraft. The transaction was around $105 million, all Phenom 300 fleet. So I'm going to let Tom lead the questions here because I'm kind of part of the news story, and it's probably better if he asks instead of me.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of interested in this story because when I read it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then when we first got on and you're like, oh, by the way, that was my company. I'm like, oh, this just got real. So I guess my question is like, did Wheels Up call you up over the weekend and just wire you like $1.5 million, or did you sell this before Wheels Up kind of acquired it?
Yeah, so we sold, we originally found the company back in 2015. We sold to Global Medical Response in March of 2022. We were supposed to happen in 2021, but things got pushed into the next year. But yes, and there's some things that I can't comment on just because of the deal in that transaction. But if you look at what's been published out there and this transaction value, you can see that it's trading for significantly less than what it was proposed to be sold for in the news, which is, we were talking about this before the show came on too. You're an entrepreneur, you sell your business and you're no longer in control of it. What happens to it is what happens to it. And I did stay with them for about a year, but I haven't been there for a year and a half. So I can't tell you why this happened, what all the terms in the deal transaction was. But I will say my heart does go out to a lot of the team because Grandview is going to be no more at this point, which includes a huge part of the workforce. But they are keeping the pilots, some other things. But yeah.
So what, I mean, you mentioned Grandview, so they did medical stuff. So what's the play here for Wheels Up? It's just this another operator that they're going to take over and just expand for their network. What's the play here for Wheels Up, and why do you think they chose Grandview?
Yeah, so I think Wheels Up has had a challenge with the fleet that they chose. I think at the time they bought a lot of it from NetJets.
Yeah.
They're kind of used and abused airplanes that were already kind of low on dispatch reliability. So this does make sense because I personally know from operating the Phenom 300 how reliable that platform is and how, the uptime is just incredible on that plane. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Wheels Up. I think they got an excellent deal, given the transaction size and the number of airplanes, which you can probably comment on because
when you said 100 for 17, really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's what 6.2, a little less than 6.2 per plane. I mean they are, it's a large fleet. It's been used and abused as well. So it's not like they're buying anything brand new.
Do you, in your opinion, your experience, do you worry about the large operators kind of scooping up the smaller ones, or is just kind of the nature of things, and ultimately it's better for the consumer when it gets more, there's only a few players, so it's a little bit more organized and streamlined, as opposed to just a bunch of mom and pop shops that you go to Charter Hub and you put it in there and you're just like, wow, there's so many options. There's almost too many.
Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons. I mean, at the end of the day, it takes scale to provide a really good product to consumers, especially in the charter market. If you don't have airplanes all over the place, they've got vacation homes everywhere that they want to access. So, for someone to have choice, it does need to be a pretty large company. Otherwise, they have to go to you and buy an airplane. Because then they can do whatever they want to. But yeah, I mean, it does mean, fewer companies in the space at this point, which has been kind of the trend. Everyone's buying up these smaller companies so that they can build these mega companies. Still, at the end of the day, compared to the size of the VistaJets and the NetJets of the world, Wheels Up still a smallish player. smallish.
Right. Do you think this was a play for Grandview because they were hurting, or is this just like an opportunity for them? I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
I mean, you can see that the hours have gone down substantially, from
Mm.
where they were. And I think what happened to, and this goes back to the entrepreneur can't control what happens when the company is sold. They wanted to change the model. They went from, our business focus was, we're going to do charter, we're going to do the organ transplant business, and we're going to have a mix of that. And Global Medical Response was obviously a much more medical focused company. So, and that goes back to too, like, there's a lot of this going on in this space. Transmedics, Summit Aviation, they're all kind of going after this organ market, which is a good market, but I don't think it can stand on its own. I think you still need to do both. So for one company to decide we're only going to do organ charter, I think it's tough.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's not a move you would have made. I get it.
Not my choice. Not my choice. But I think they're going to have success. I know everyone's probably like, wheels up and more debt, but it takes debt to grow fleets. Like, this is the deal. We'll see as Wheels Up starts to change their citation 10s out for challengers. I think it's a good move. Those are both good airplanes, and we'll see how they do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had a conversation yesterday with a broker because they're in the XL market, and they were getting word of other operators, large name operators that would be upgrading to the Ascend platform from the XL and the XLS platform. And he's like, and this is a newer broker, so he's like, Tom, what's this going to do? I'm like, well, first of all, it's not what you think. It's not like the company's just going to dump 20 excels on the market and completely erode any opportunity they have. They have different ways that they're going to go about it, but it is going to impact those current owners of those makes and models that are going to be introduced into the marketplace, because there's going to be more supply. And so I think it's important for owners, if you're reading this news and you own an XLS, an XL, or whatever else they might be dumping it in the next 2-3 years. I think it said it was a 3-year rollout. That's something to keep in mind. I mean, these are they're back to depreciating assets now. We saw the appreciation in 2021, 22. It's been coming down since 22, slowly but surely. And I think we're getting close to 2020 pricing where it used to be. So if you have had your XL or XLS for 2-3 years or more, we're kind of back to it might be time to start thinking about what your next move is, whether that's upgrading or getting out of it, whatever. But I think it's important to note for the current owners what this is going to do to the values on the pre-owned market.
No, that's a great point. And I think too, just in general, like, I saw a JetNet story yesterday, I think, but it seems like the market is just in this weird position right now with the election going on, political circumstances. The market's like kind of funky right now. I mean, is that
Funky's a great
your
word.
experience? Yeah,
funky's a great word. It's stalled in some spots and it's still moving along in other spots. And so the challenge for brokers right now is just finding where it's moving, and that just takes flexibility, adaptability, and hustle. So it's not like it used to be where if you got a listing, you would get over asking price in a week, back in 2022. Now it's like you get a listing and it's going to be a little bit of a longer sales cycle. And I am interested to see what's going to happen in November. Although I'll be honest, I think for a lot of people, they're going to use November as an excuse because they're not ready to make that decision. They're going to use the holidays next. They're going to use the new year. And that's just human behavior. Like, we might not be ready to make a decision. And so we just will put it off on blame other things to hold off the decision. And, that's where the brokers come in to really kind of cut through all that and say, like, do you really want to sell and why should you?
Yeah, so it's a weird time in the market. There might be a lot more planes coming into the market as well, but that's good to, pay attention to these things, because choosing what aircraft you're going to go forward with and what value you're going to reasonably expect to get out of it over the next few years could be impacted by these moves. But, I will say, like, as much as people have kind of loved to hate on Wheels Up over the last couple of years, like, we don't want them to fail. They have a lot of airplanes. We don't want all those airplanes out in the market. Like, if Delta can move this thing and get it working, they think they can get cash flow positive by the end of the year, then good on them. I think everybody wants that, and we don't want to see all these planes back in the market. We want to see them flying.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, it comes down to accessibility for private aviation. The more people that can get involved in private aviation, the bigger of a role, the bigger of a voice we as private aviation, business aviation have. And that's going to come down to having a voice, like in the second story we're going to talking about, whether that's just consumers having a voice in what the operators are going to do, or later on when we get into governmental things, where like, does the government invest time, energy, and money in infrastructure for private aviation? We want more people to have the experience of private aviation than less, so that we have a bigger voice when it comes to these larger conversations.
Well, that's a great segue to our next story. So, FlexJet is hosting a design competition, which I thought was really unique and interesting. But you have a chance to win $100,000 and design the interior of one of their Gulfstream 6. So, Tom, are you going to be getting out your textile skills and figuring out what to put in these things?
I'm a big fan of the double stitch. The diamond stitch, I'm sorry, and I'm a big fan of the two-tone. Okay, so it's one thing. So they're called FlexJet, so they got to flex, right? So they have to have a unique. I think that's cool. It's going to say complement its nearly 50 custom interiors.
They have a lot.
So they're going to have like 50 of these, and they each tell a unique story, which is really cool. I think it's interesting to talk about FlexJet doing it and inviting people to do it for their fleet. And I also think it's an interesting conversation when you talk about individuals who decide to, air Drake. I mean, this. It's not subtle, but I like it. I really like putting a flavor on an aircraft. It's an asset. Like, yeah, you can look at resale, but listen, like, if you're buying a jet, like, that's yours. Have fun with it, man. Like, let's go. Let's have a good time and worry about it later. And just you take the hit. You're like, you know what? This is where I'm gonna accept this risk and have fun, because you're flying in your own jet. It's good stuff.
Well, and that's like the difference here too. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like if I'm going to go out and buy my own aircraft, I'm going to customize the heck out of it and have, the leopard print or whatever it is that I want inside, regardless of, the resale value and, who's going to buy that aircraft. But I do look at, these fractional companies, and FlexJet is different in this aspect. They don't make everything kind of consistent and the same. They do these highly customized interiors, and just, as a fleet operator, I did the opposite. I went for, let's get as neutral and modern and clean design everything inside so it looks consistent, the experience is the same. But FlexJet's really gone a different path. And some of theirs I love, and then honestly, some of them I don't like. I think they're like too much, but different strokes for different folks. Maybe I just don't have the taste that those customers do.
Yeah, and as long as they can, like you said, on the operational sides, be good with it, because you hate to have a golf bag, scratch up and tear a piece of leather that is like chartreuse or whatever that color is, and you don't have that color readily available, and now all of a sudden the plane's down, or something because of the interior design. You hate to see something like that happen.
Yeah, well, and I wonder how much they're going to take that into account too. It's not just the look, it's the usability of the aircraft over time. I mean, we had a table on a Phenom 300 that we couldn't replace for like 8 months because that veneer was out of stock, even though it was, a production stock. And I'm like, okay, I have to wait a year for a $40,000 table? What are you talking about? Like but that happens,
Reality.
and people don't realize it.
That's how things happen in aviation. You don't think about when it breaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some stuff that you just shouldn't customize too. I feel like the door handles, the things that are going to get used over and over and over again, and you need to replace. Like unless you have a massive stock of those parts, which who's going to do that? Maybe just customize your upholstery that can be replaced relatively easily,
and have a bunch of stock ones like available. So if they have to fix it, and it's just like, all right, we're back to beige.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of runners, man. You better make sure you have some carpet runners to cover up things, especially if you're going to be chartering out. Make sure it's covered. All right. And the next story, this is not new, but it is kind of a cap in what's been going on. So Textron out of Wichita, Kansas is not the first. It's one of many that's had labor issues. So the latest strike was with the machinist at Textron, but that has now been, the deal's been ratified. It was 31% in wage increases over the span of a 5-year agreement. Not new, but actually, slightly less than what I've seen in some of these pilot deals. Some of those were like 40 plus, but it's good for Textron. They can get back to making those $40,000 tables or whatever else it is. They need to put in the aircraft.
Yeah. It was. I'm glad that the strike is coming to a resolution. It's definitely something that what I think this story called to mind is the greater ecosystem of aviation. So many people just look at aviation as the owners that get to fly in their bougie private jets, and like, they have all their opinions on that, the one percenters, the environment, yada yada yada. But they don't take into account this entire ecosystem that private aviation opens up. It's the pilots, it's the mechanics, it's the people who make the parts, it's the people who put the parts together, it's the people who fix the parts. And this entire ecosystem of aviation came to a halt when a part of that ecosystem was like, no, we got to stop for a little bit. And so I think that's really, I'm glad that it's coming to resolution. I hope that I imagine they're at least acceptable of the conditions that they're getting. But it really, I would like to highlight, that grander ecosystem for the listeners, that like, thank you for investing your time, your interest, and your finances in aviation, because you're a part of something bigger that is putting food on the table for a lot of people. And don't lose sight of that, especially if people start to kind of harp on private aviation because of all their own baggage.
Yeah. And that's, honestly, look, Textron is one of the few aircraft manufacturers we have left in the United States. We need to, this is good. This is moving forward. And we do not highlight that enough. Even like at our trade shows, I often, like when I went to the Paris Air Show a couple years ago, and it was all supply chain. I mean, it was, this widget and this doodad and this, system. And we have some of that at MBAA, but I feel like we are much more focused on the flashy, the FlexJet interiors and the bouginess and all that stuff. But like, we are providing some incredible jobs to, people in the United States and other countries that are engaged in this kind of stuff. But yeah, no, that's a really good point, that these are the rubber meets the road, is with these machinists making those things that keep your airplane moving and functioning, and they deserve it. I think after inflation over the last few years, everyone needs to get back into to a reasonable wage at this point.
Yes.
All right. So the next story, we're focusing on eVTOLs. I think, obviously this world is still coming into play. We don't know when we're going to really have eVTOLs flying in the sky, but it does seem like there is some traction. For example, Atlantic Aviation this week decided they were going to be installing chargers at their East 34th Street heliport location, which is in Manhattan. So they've had that location for a while, but with this agreement with New York Development Corporation, they're going to be extending it for another 5 years. So we were talking about this a little bit in pre-show, and I think it's cool. I love the idea of, airplanes or eVTOLs flying in and out of Manhattan.
Yeah, let's go.
But for anyone who's from New York, there's some significant challenges in the electricity there. Like the infrastructure of New York City and Manhattan is pretty bad. I think most people don't even have like 240 volt service in their house. Most of it's 208. So I would love to talk to an electrician about like, is this going to work?
Yeah,
Are we going to get fast charging in Manhattan?
Yeah. And I think, it's I mean, I don't know how fast it takes for these eVTOLs to charge up. If it's something that they maybe don't need the fast charge. I mean, and also and the traffic and how much they're going to be using it. If it's like a slow, if this is like a slow ramp up, I think we're probably going to be okay. But if they're like, yeah, let's put like 20, things ready to go, like at a moment's notice, like Uber, I think you're going to run into some issues.
Yeah, I mean, and even today, when you look at the helipads there, like you have to get in and out. Like there's not enough room, especially with all the air tours they have going on. Like you can't just sit there and charge the thing for an hour. Like they don't have time for that. Or if they do, they're going to charge you a significant amount. But I guess maybe they're smaller. But I don't know. My experience this summer was I was on a boat. We were supposed to have 240 volt service, which, for this boat, like that's what it needed. And the connection was there, but we plugged it in and it's only like 208 volts. I mean, it's a serious issue. And I think some of these fast chargers, some of them need 480 volts, 600 volts, especially if they're talking about the rapid charge to get that thing in and out to do these tours. I don't know. I think it's much more likely they're probably going to be charging in New Jersey than they are in Manhattan, but maybe.
Bring it on. Jersey will love it. I'm from Jersey. I love it. Let's go. Bring them to Jersey.
Or, well, there was some other news was that, Newark Airport's going to have these. And I'm like, that makes sense. So maybe it's sitting there waiting for passengers charging.
So, I mean, I guess it's up to the pilot to figure that out, huh? Yeah.
Well, they are short hops, at least, I guess, 5-10 minute flights. So they shouldn't drain the battery that much. I don't know. It's just it still seems still seems far away, but everyone keeps saying they're going to start flying in 2025. So I guess we'll
I
see.
love it. I love it. I love it. Bring it on. I want to look up in the sky and just kind of see these like, like little drone things.
And actually, the FAA is moving on this as well. So they recently, actually this week at NBAA, they published the new special federal aviation regulations on powered lift, which was something that was a bit of a debate over the last year. The original rule that they put out there basically said you had to have two controls in the cockpit to do flight training. And a lot of these designs did not have two sets of controls, they only had one. So the FAA did take that into consideration and is modifying how you can train these aircraft versus helicopters and the like. But yeah, I don't know. Are you going to be getting in one of these, Tom, anytime
I
soon?
would, yeah. I mean, let's go. I'm game. Let's have a good time, and I trust the pilots. I mean, sure, there's buildings in the way and stuff, but I'm sure we could figure it out. You know, it's I don't know. Like you said, it's a short hop, and I'm just glad to see a little bit of flexibility. From a large organization like the FAA. I mean, there's so much that you hear pilots like whether it's mental health or medication and all this kind of stuff, and we're just looking for like, hey, help us get to the end goal, and this is showing signs of we want to get to the end goal of being able to transport passengers safely in a populated area around buildings. And let's get more qualified pilots in the sky, and let's not have this be a problem that the manufacturers have to go back and solve before we can take a bridging step. So I do appreciate seeing the FAA move in that direction.
Yeah, they took into account a lot of people's comments. I've only gotten through maybe like a third of the rulemaking because it's extensive and highly technical. But there's things like they're basically they're trying to adopt some of the helicopter standards versus the airplane standards when it makes sense, allowing more training to happen in a simulator than in the aircraft, since some of them only have one control, which is actually, it looks like, and again I have to read more deeply into this, but it looks like they're also going to start relaxing some of that simulator requirement also for rotorcraft and airplane potentially. So they're saying training is just as good in this simulator,
Right.
then everyone should be able to train in the simulator, not just the eVTOL folks. So at least I think they're making it fair.
Yeah, being consistent in the language is good.
Yeah, and they're trying to be consistent with international rules. I will say, and I'm going to quote this from the rulemaking, they said, consequently, powered lift, or the eVTOLs, would not be required to operate at the level of safety required of operations conducted with airplanes, helicopters, or rotorcraft. So they are still kind of lowering the standard a bit to allow this burgeoning market to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I might wait a little bit until they figure some of this out before I get in one. I don't know.
I haven't had a chance to look at them up close, and consider it operationally. But like, I mean, I feel like the standards to be a taxi driver is probably a little lower than a bus driver. So I mean, I can kind of see why all flight is not equal. They're not going to have to be worrying about cross country planning. Weather's probably gonna, I would imagine, maybe a little bit less of an issue because it's like you're around buildings. If it's not VFR, we're not going. Like
Right.
if I can't see where I'm going, I'm not testing this. So I could see why they might, I don't know if I would say lower the standards, but they wouldn't have the same standards.
Mm-hmm. Well, and some of it's still so open-ended. I mean, they're looking at, what about having see and avoid technology, so that the aircraft may be more autonomous and have more safety features built in. So a single pilot in that situation is less risky. It's just so hard to say what these things are going to look like when they're done, if they're done.
Would you rather fly in a manned or an unmanned autonomous, eVTOL?
Yeah,
You
that's
want
a
a pilot,
tough
or do you
one.
trust the computer better in the city?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is when you look at safety reports, look, there is usually operator error, is the cause of a lot of things that go wrong. But there's also operator error in design and function. Yeah, I can't tell you yet. I guess
Well,
we'll have
I'm
to
the
wait
kind
and
of
see when we
person
get
that
there.
I have the rear backup camera in my car, and I still look back. Like I don't trust me to fly. I guess that's why it's taking me so long to get my instrument rating. Trust the instruments, they say. I'm looking outside. I can't
Like
see
this
anything.
one.
I don't know. It's always that balance, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. That's what it will come down to, and that's why they have like some of these transitioning from like a single pilot and then to the autonomous, just so people have that like mental stress relief. But I have the same thing. Like I have the Ford 150 Lightning, you know, the electric truck, and it took me a while to really trust that it was going to stay in the lane and keep the distance and all the other things. But now I'm like, I'm just sitting there like with my hands like all over the place, like barely paying attention. Like I got used to it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I do agree. I have that on my van. It's much easier to drive that than it is, having to be on there the whole
Yeah.
time.
No, but I want to see the statistics on this because I mean, I imagine like all this lane keeping technology, this has got to have some significant impact on safety. And especially in aviation where you're in a pretty, sterile environment, relatively speaking. There's not people bobbing and weaving in front of
Jet
you all the time yet. Yeah. There are birds. The birds are a
jetpacks,
problem.
yeah, pigeons. Then we're gonna get jetpacks, and then it's all gonna be crazy.
Yeah, hopefully the pigeons are, small enough for those rollerblades. We'll see. It's the turkeys you got to watch out for. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the pod today. Thank you for joining us, Tom. The VIP seat is the fastest way to get your top news on what's happening in private aviation. Don't forget to subscribe to our weekly email digest in the show and click follow wherever you get your podcasts. I'll also throw in Tom's show. I think you live stream on Wednesdays, you said?
Yep, we live streams Wednesdays 10:30 Eastern, and we drop a brand new episode every Friday.
Awesome. So we will link to that as well so you guys can hear more from Tom and what he's working on. Comments and suggestions on what we should cover next are always welcome. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time on the VIP seat.